like to welcome Kathleen Marden here today. It's going to be a very interesting interview. Syann, would you like to do the honours, please?
The honours?
The honours.
Good morning. How are you? Kathleen, maybe you would like to just briefly share a little bit about your work with MUFON over the years and where it's led you to now, for those that might not be so familiar with what you do what you've done over the years.
Yes, I'd love to. I first of all should say that I'm the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, world famous case, the first scientifically investigated case of alien abduction. That's what they called it then in the United States. And so I was sort of almost born into this. I was 13 years old when it happened to my aunt and uncle. So I saw the unfolding. I investigated it myself. And that's what got me involved with the Mutual UFO Network. How could I investigate a case if I didn't know how to investigate? Yeah. So I took their field investigator training and learned how to conduct an investigation, and did that, I believe, in as much depth or more depth than anyone else in the world has on that particular case. And continued to look for evidence that could be scientifically studied and perhaps verified. So I've continued to do that, and I still do. We have new findings that have just been published in my book, Captured: The Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, the 60th anniversary edition, new updated. So I'm really excited about that. So I learned how to become an investigator through the Mutual UFO Network. And before I knew it, I ended up being their director of field investigator training. I did that for 10 years. And actually, I think I stopped doing that because my book and Stanton Friedman did some work on my first book too. That was being published. And so I stepped down because I was going to have a lot of interviews and traveling to do. Yeah. And then in 2011, MUFON's director asked me if I might be able to help the organization again. So I said, well, what do you have in mind? And he said, well, we want to set up protocols for investigating an alien abduction. And we wanted to know if you could write those protocols. Oh. And so I put together a team of experts and met with them individually over a period, quite a bit, maybe up to a year's period of time, and was able to write these protocols. I had people who were psychologists, people who were forensic investigators, police department detectives, that sort of thing, who and scientists who could give us information on how to best investigate a UFO contact incident. And I wrote that. And then, okay, so what do I do next? I don't want to be just a figurehead in an organization. If I'm going to do it, I want to work. So by that time, we had a new executive director. And he said, well, why don't you put an experiencer questionnaire up on the MUFON website? So I said, okay, well, I'll devise one with 30 questions. And I'm not going to have number 30. If you get all 30 right, it means you're an experiencer. I'm going to have it a different way. So in the first study that I had done with Denise Stoner, and you took part in that, Paul.
I did actually. I remember
published, that's how I met you. That was published way back in 2013. So I used the information from that and constructed those 30 questions. And then we found that 23 of the 30 represented commonalities among experiencers. So I put the 30 on. I knew what the 23 were. So anyone between 10 and 23 probably has had at least one experience with an extraterrestrial entity. So we did that. And then, okay, people wanted to talk to me. And so I started talking to people, and Denise Stoner and I were the only ones talking to people. And soon we were overwhelmed. I was ready to quit. I was burning out. And
absolutely.
so I said, I told the executive director, Jan Harzan at that time, how I was feeling. And he said, well, why don't you add people to the team? So we added people to the team. We developed an application and we vetted people for the team. And so by the time I stepped down in 2021, we had 50 kind, compassionate, highly knowledgeable individuals on contact phenomena.
Are they still doing that now? Is there still 50 people that are doing that? Or
yes, it keeps growing, but I think it's still about 50. Yes. And so we have all of these people who do non-judgmental listening, because what most experiencers find is if they try to confide in someone, their best friend or their minister or whatever, it's like, you're demon possessed. What have you been drinking? What have you been smoking? They're ridiculed. And so people can talk to members of the ERT without being ridiculed, and it makes all the difference in the world. And it helps people because sometimes they will discover that they have a lot in common with other experiencers as well. So that's important. And then we have a list of vetted professionals that an experiencer can enter into a private contract with. This doesn't involve MUFON at all.
All right,
but they work with the private for pay contract. And we have psychotherapists for people who are still traumatized. And we have hypnotherapists who have been highly trained and have worked with experiencers in the past.
So Kathleen, just a question, were those people that were going to see the psychotherapists, were they being continually taken, or had they just had, like, say, just a common example from you, is it just a person who's had a one-off or two-off experience, or are those people the ones that are always being taken?
What I find is those who have been taken for the first time, regardless of the type of contact they've had, end up feeling traumatized because they don't know what's happened. And the only thing they probably do know is that the fear mongers have told them that they're going to be probed and prodded and treated like lab rats. And then they'll have hypnosis and they'll find out that it was nothing like that at all. So, but some people carry trauma further down the line, especially if they have not been able to speak with anyone about it or receive any support. And so they might need to have just a few sessions with a psychotherapist who is trained in EMDR therapy, for example, the rapid eye movement therapy, which is very effective in helping them to overcome this fear that they carry in their bodies.
So with your own contact then, so you've had contact yourself, correct?
Yes, I have.
Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, I can talk about that. Well, my aunt, Betty Hill, was doing contact experiences with a team of scientists. And this started in 1965 and 1966. And so they were giving her a script, and she was to send telepathic messages to these ETs every night, 7 days a week. And what they would contain would be the number of days we were into the year, what day, the number of days into the month, and the location where they would want this craft to show up. So one of these locations was my grandmother and grandfather's farm in Kingston, New Hampshire. This is where Betty grew up. My mother grew up there. My mother is Betty's sister. And so as a child, I lived across the street from my grandparents. And Betty is doing these experiments, and a craft did come in and it landed. And that was the first time that my mother and I had conscious recall of finding ourselves on that craft.
So
and I thought I was never going to tell anybody in my entire life, but
just to stop you right there. Okay, so
yeah.
do you remember the craft landing? Did you see the craft landing? You didn't. You just were on the craft.
Yes, I did not see it, but there were two witnesses to that craft. One was my grandmother, and the other one was a neighbor who was a commercial pilot returning home from work that night.
But you ended up on that craft, didn't you?
My mother and I did, yes.
Yeah. So you don't have any memory of actually being put on that craft?
No.
That's really interesting. I like that. Okay, sorry.
I ended up on it, and Betty and I, my aunt and I, used to argue about that because I would say, well, why do you think that craft landed on Nana and Graham's farm? And she said, oh, they just probably wanted to take a break.
Probably not.
I said, oh yeah, they were just taking a break and they decided to land there. I said, there's more to it. They were there for a reason.
Yeah, they would have had to have come into the house, and they would have had to have applied screen memory technology and walked you to the craft if you're physically on board. I mean, they can float people.
Yes.
You know, as you know, matter through matter, all those sorts of things if they need to, but there's plenty of ways to get humans on craft.
Right. So I don't know if we were on the craft before it was coming down for a landing, or if that's when they were just going to drop us off back at our house.
Right, yeah.
Who knows?
And do you remember how you felt after you'd been on the craft at all?
Well, the funny thing is, I knew I had been in a different environment. I was no longer in my bedroom. But the only way that I could put this together in my mind was that I must have needed some kind of surgery. And that my mother had arranged to have this surgical team come to my house in the middle of the night and do this secret surgery on me. You know, so that's the mind of a 17-year-old. But
it makes perfect sense at the time, doesn't it?
Of course.
That's the way I rationalized it.
Wow. There's something, you know, honestly, if we could unpack that, I mean, not we won't, but that's huge. When you think about that, quite often when we come off craft ourselves, we or have any contact the next day, we feel like we're in a distortion because there's a difference between the time reference from here and in craft. The craft vibrated about 10 times the frequency of our normal reality here.
Yeah, it normally loses feeling quite giddy the next morning.
Could be, But I've spoken to a lot of experiences as well, and they've told me the same thing the next day. Like they feel like they've been baseball batted, you know, like it's
I had some physical pain the next day.
Right. But they've been visiting you your whole life as well. So
well, probably, but I didn't know any of that. I did have hypnosis recently. And prior to recently, whenever I attempted to look into when this first began in my life, I'd become very frightened and I just couldn't get beyond that. But I did get a very, very clear recollection just recently under hypnosis, where a little boy and I found ourselves on this craft. I was 3 years old. and we were in a room. There was a little disc, a shiny kind of blackish grayish disc. It reminded me of a beach stone from off the coast of New Hampshire. And we were having a great time elevating that with using only our eyes. So we were lifting it up into the air. And I remember I turned, and when I did, I saw a girl who looked exactly like me. She was dressed in a plaid jumper, which I was not at the time. She had on a blouse underneath it with puff sleeves, I think. And she had long, blondish, dark blonde and light blonde hair, like she'd been in the sun. And she had a huge grin on her face. She was so excited that we were able to do this. And standing beside her was my familiar little, you like to call him Zeta, my little escort that was always with me when I was taken.
Yeah, people generally have companions with them all the time. They just can't see them. That's the thing. Because obviously a lot of people are hybrids, and when the hybrids incarnate, they actually end up with a companion, a Zeta companion, especially from that race. Other races have a different process. So that's one thing I talk to a lot of people about is their companions. Yeah. Do you remember what the boy looked like at all?
He was a little blonde boy. I think he was about my age.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Kind of nondescript.
Yeah, because we see that a lot with people. They go, well, I had a person with me, and they were sort of around my age, and this boy, he seemed to have a lot of contact with the race, and they used the child as an intermediary between the frightened child and the race as a process to calm that child down. It happened to Syann on craft as well. Twice.
Yeah. Around when I was 3 or 4 years old as well. I recall playing with a small boy in my lounge in the middle of the night. Of course, I didn't have a brother, and of course, and I didn't have any male cousins or any. There would be no reason for this small boy to be in the middle of the house for a few hours and then not there the next morning, and wasn't there when I went to bed. And there'd be no reason why I was up at 3, goodness knows what time it was in the morning either. But yeah, I found myself in what I believed was my lounge room, interacting with a small boy. And I recall looking round and seeing several very tall beings observing, just stood and observing. It was like they were just, I don't know, watching us interact. But there was no levitation of anything. For me, it was just simply observing a natural interaction.
The thing that was most interesting to me about that is I've never had a sister, but she looked exactly like me, only older. So I'm wondering if maybe she was just a hybrid who lives on the craft or lives with the ETs.
Absolutely. It's possible, because we've been on craft and there's plenty of planets where humans have been cultivated. That's one word. I mean, cultivated is quite a large word in regards to, they're not sort of grown in the ground or anything, but it's more about how they create human extraterrestrial hybrids. And yes, absolutely, like yourself, that much of the contact that takes place with people is generational, and sometimes it can also skip a generation as well. And so it wouldn't be unusual to have siblings who are hybrids on planet and living off planet, this planet. And of course, you can have a sister, you can have children, you can have lots of different things. We see it all the time.
Yes. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you've been healed by the Zetas as well. Did you want to speak about that at all?
Say that again?
You've been healed by the Zetas as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was ill with an incurable disease condition from 1988 until 2012. Initially, I was extraordinarily ill. I had to leave my profession, leave everything that I valued behind. And I was bedridden for quite a long time. I had a horrible pain in my head, in the roof of my mouth. I had word finding problems. I didn't know if I was dying or what was wrong. First doctor I went to said that it looked like I had radiation poisoning, but radiation from what? You know, that's what I thought then. And I lost a tremendous amount of weight. I was too weak to be able to walk, and couldn't drive a car. I couldn't do anything for a period of time. And then eventually I started to feel a little bit better, but I would have periods where it would wax and wane. And finally I moved beyond being bedridden with it to the point where I was like an 85-year-old woman. If I tried to work, I would feel something inside that would say, you have to stop now. If you go beyond this point, you will be bedridden. And so it was really a yoke around my neck. And it was difficult to deal with, particularly after I had written. Well, I became a writer because it was the only thing I could do without exerting too much energy. And but then speaking at conferences, that sort of thing, I'd go to bed early, and when I arrived home from the conference, I would be in bed for a day or two afterward and just feeling completely worn out. So that's when I talked to you. You offered me the opportunity to speak with Pete.
That's right.
And I think I'd spoken with him maybe a few times before I decided that I was going to ask him for healing. And so I did, and I didn't really anticipate that he would give me healing. But 4 nights later, I woke up during the night and I was in a tremendous amount of pain in my internal organs and at the top of my right leg. And I woke my husband up and I said to him, you might have to take me to the hospital. I don't know what's wrong. I had a lot of pain in the left side of my chest and abdomen. And I said, you might have to take me to the hospital or call an ambulance. And he said, well, give it a couple of minutes, see how you do. And so I did. But the next thing I knew, and I have not had hypnosis for this, I looked into my journal today and discovered this was a conscious recall. And what I consciously recalled was finding myself lying on a table. And I was in almost like a misty kind of environment. There were 2 beings that I was aware of on each side by my head. They seemed taller than my normal gray, but of course I don't know how high the table was. But they were glowing. And I was confused about what's going on. And that's when they showed me, I don't know if it was a screen or a screen image, a holograph or what, but what I saw was the outline of my body reclined, and through the periphery of my body, I saw like little bots, like energy running through the periphery. And then I saw the organs inside my body. And I remember that one was mint green and the other was pink. And they were working on those particular organs, I felt. And I was still feeling pain, but I knew that it would be over soon. And so they finished what they were doing, apparently. I woke up in bed the next morning and I felt like I was 23 again. Not an ache, not a pain, energy that I hadn't had since I was young. And it was so wonderful. So, Paul, I'll forever be grateful to you and to Keek for helping me with that. It was, it changed my life radically.
Yeah. With Kathleen, you know, the Zetas, they, you know, and you'll notice I always talk about them. We don't say that we did this or we did that. We don't say that. The Zetas, they heal a lot of people, as you know. So people have come to us and asked for healing, and this, we've seen some absolutely stunning type things take place where technology comes down through the roof and does stuff with people. You know, it looks like they've had organs removed and then re-implanted, and you know, like if you tell this stuff to people, they'll look at you like that's just not possible. But for the Zetas, it's more like it's just normal run-of-the-day stuff. But the problem's always been for everybody that asks for healing is, will the Zetas actually give them a healing? And the Zetas were always the ones to determine whether they would or they wouldn't. So in the beginning, they said, well, we're only ever going to heal our own because the technology is based around them healing hybrid Zetas. And then about a year ago, we were doing a workshop down in Sydney, and the Zetas, I know this sounds a little bit out there, but anyway, whatever. The whole room was turned into like a hospital bay. There's all technology coming into the room, and they would bring each person, there was 10 people that came in. And when they got to a person that wasn't from their race, what they were doing was going through a portal, bringing back a surgeon from that race to work on that hybrid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and Syann saw this
Amazing.
take place. The other people in the room were seeing it as well.
Yeah.
How they were seeing it, we don't know. How the etheric body was worked on, as well as, you know, with all the technologies and stuff. Oh, I can't wait till we get past disclosure and they actually start to work with humans properly and with the technologies that they have. We could be such a healthy planet. We really could.
Be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, there are other people that we work with that have had some really good healings. Like one of them had the etheric ear that you would have read about as well. That ear is still in operation as well, and it gets tested every year. So that's they've definitely got some specific technologies that work well with humans. Yeah. And I think that they've been able to get that way because of the contact that they have with people like yourself and myself and other people, because contact generally started full on about 70 years ago. And that was to do with what was going on the planet and radio waves being emitted into the solar system and all those sorts of things. So they decided back then to start working more heavily with humans. But it's, you know, like, and you'd have to agree, it's been a wonderful journey. I mean, we have the pain and all the rest of it that goes with some of that stuff. And I know myself, I've had procedures done that I didn't like either. And I think I had one done the other day. I woke up, I thought that a mosquito had bitten me on the foot in the middle of the night. And when I looked in the morning, I had blood on my foot. And I spoke to Syann about it, and yeah, something had taken place that night. Wow. Anyway.
Yes. Well, I've had many experiencers come to me and say that they are ill, that they have some sort of condition, and so I simply tell them to send telepathic messages to their ETs day and night. Do it several times a day, and by doing this, and I say if it's one person, then I will help and send these messages to. Yeah. And people have been healed.
Yeah, they do.
So that was a very good thing.
They heal their own. That's what all it comes down to. And if people that were hybrids, and you know, the Zetas say that about 30% of the people on the planet are hybrids. If they just keep sending the message out telepathically, at some point something's going to shift because they've got the capacity to do it.
And they can hear the beings that work with us, that even though we might not be able to hear them, they can hear us. They might not understand each individual word, but they understand the energy and the intent behind the words.
Yeah. One thing, sorry. So one thing we found out a couple of weeks ago was how they use what's called compression, and it makes a lot of explanations more clear. So they say if you look at a clock, you have 60 seconds in a minute, but they would have 600 seconds in a minute. And that's called compression. And so when a craft comes and you see it, and then it's gone and it's up here now, a mile away, and it happened in the blink of an eye, it actually did travel there. But we look like we're really slow and they look like they're really fast, but because of the time differences. And so the craft, because of their conscious biological entities, they're able to shift from one time frame to another. So when people are taken on board craft, they have to be moved from their time frame to the time frame on the craft. And that's how they're actually able to put the matter of the human onto the craft as well. And so it's actually explained so much to me in regards to why people have missing time, what happens when they have missing time. Suddenly their fingernails are growing, they've got a beard, or not a beard, but they've got to have a shave, but they've only been gone 30 minutes. They've actually been gone, probably 5 hours or something, if it's 10 times the ratio. And so that explains a lot in regards to that. So I'm hoping that information now can be used, because my whole thing is with people is working through their experiences so that they understand them in a way that is based around their screen memory technology, rather than sort of pulling screen memories off looking for what's going on. It's more about working around that and seeing how they have integrated the screen memories into a person's life. Because we've noticed with the screen memories, they actually hold a lot of people's minds stable. And the more that people try to undo or unpick their screen memories, sometimes the more issues they can have. I'm not saying that's always happening, but so this is a question for you, because you do quantum hypnotherapy. Do you find that people become more stable when they have hypnotherapy?
Yes.
Yeah.
If they have the right kind.
Yeah.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
They have that after support as well, I imagine. I can imagine a lot of people, randomly picking a hypnotherapist out the ads on the, the newspaper, like
a big mistake.
And they rip the plaster off and then they're left high and dry with what's uncovered, if it even works,
And so often those hypnotherapists or hypnotists who are not trained to work with experiencers will have an experiencer who becomes extraordinarily frightened in the process of being taken to craft, for example. And instead of helping that person through, telling that person, it's in the past, you won't feel it now, all sorts of suggestions to make that person feel comfortable, they will simply end the hypnosis. So what is that experiencer left with? Terror.
More terror than
that's the worst thing that can happen.
Well, yourself, Kathleen, it's like, I mean, the amount of people I've seen lately, and I know this is pretty negative, but people are saying reptilians are eating people and all these sorts of things. And I say, well, where did you get that information from? Oh, it was a screen memory. Okay, so do you remember having contact? No, but I had some hypnotherapy, and I had a dream, and then I went and got hypnotherapy, and then I was told this, and I'm like, well, maybe what if this isn't true? What if what you've been told isn't true? And now you're basing your whole life around that.
One problem with hypnosis is once you have it, you truly believe it much more than you did prior to having the hypnosis. It sort of cements that memory in your mind. And I will not work with anyone who doesn't have some conscious recall. If somebody comes to me and says, I had this dream, and so I want to be hypnotized, I simply won't do it.
No, that's really,
I think it's unethical to do that. You have to know that the person actually is having these experiences, and that person is not suffering from some kind of mental illness, etc. You know, so it's not something that you can take lightly.
what I always find really interesting is I won't, you know, there's one person in particular I'm thinking about. They've actually been able to get a lot of photographic evidence in regards to their contact, and they don't understand what's going on, and that's okay. I mean, nobody does in the beginning, but there's a lot of people out there that are saying, oh, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? Where's this? Where's that? But a lot of people, most people just don't want to come forward. I don't blame them for not coming forward.
Right.
You know, every day people go, well, where's your proof? You know, like we had the Craftland, we had the 20 people with us. We have had people that have come on video and said, yes, it happened, we were there. But should they always be made to come on video? Should they always be made to go and give their statements? Should they always be made? People have got private lives. And, you know, just because they had an experience doesn't mean that they're labelled with that experience for the rest of their lives either. You know, that's one thing that I think people need to understand, that what's happening to everybody, or for the people that are being contacted, is very private, and it's also an intimate privacy as well. And if we all, you included, choose to share that, that I think is in some way us wanting others to know what's possible. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And, you know, it took me many, many years to come to this decision. And the reason I did is that mediums would come up to me at conferences and say, you know, you really should make your story public because you would help so many people. They just knew that I was an experiencer. And finally, with enough times of myself being up on a stage with people like Whitley Strieber and other high profile experiencers, I was just tired of having to lie and say, no, I'm not an experiencer, I'm a researcher. And then experiencers would say, well, these researchers have no idea what you're going through. And I wasn't able to say, well, I do know. I've known this for most of my life. You know, so I was in a difficult situation, and I hate terribly to lie too. And so I decided that I would tell the truth, but not a lot of it. But I have written much more in my book, Forbidden Knowledge, a personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation.
Can I ask you, what was the name of the book that I wrote something in for you, and I can't remember what the name of it was? Which one was that one?
What did you write?
The one that you're in?
No, the one you asked me to write something in one, or something about it. And I wrote something, and it was about, I said that a lot of people actually weren't being abducted. Do you remember that?
I think that was in my book, The Alien Abduction Files.
Yeah,
I think that's the one that it was in.
Yeah. I had a few people question me about that. That was pretty funny. Yeah.
Maybe an extraterrestrial contact, what to do when you've been abducted. Too, but I'm not certain about that.
All right.
I keep writing books. I just love it. I have a passion for writing. And I just submitted that book for publication today, the latest.
Well, that's really exciting. Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I know where your passion comes from. I mean, I'm the same. You know, we're up to 6 books as well, and it's like, what's the next one? You know, and I'm starting to think about, well, how am I going to, what should I really say? Because, you know, you could have all this inside information, which would be really interesting in a book. But I always feel that I think I need a bit of help because my grammar's not too good and all the rest of it. So.
The more practice you get, the better you'll be, especially if you have an editor who is correcting the mistakes that you've made. So
Yeah.
it will work out much better. And now Word has its own editor,
I've seen
Microsoft
it.
Word, and it really is very valuable.
All right. Well, look, it's been fantastic speaking to you today. I've really enjoyed it. And I
I
really
have
like the
too.
fact that we were able to talk about our own experiences with the race. And not, yeah, it's for me, it's been quite a lovely conversation that we've had with you today.
For me as well, it was great speaking with both of you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.